Last time we talked about how to build and output a 2D array. This time we're going to get some user input and actually use that to output the array. We want to get some information from them so we can output the array. Because we're getting user information, we need to be able to store that user information, the user input. So we're going to need two variables. So I'm going to do dim, which stands for dimensionalize, user row as integer because they're going to be entering a number. And I'm going to dimensionalize int user column as integer. Now I have this set up in advance. I've thought about what I want to do, and I want the user to decide which row and which column, the XY coordinate that they want to manipulate. So I'm going to ask them a question. I'm going to do console.writeLine, and I'm going to ask them, what row do you want to be 1? Now, because I have that, I need to be able to store that information. So that is where this variable comes into play. So my int user row variable is going to be equal to what the user has typed in. And the command for that is console.readLine. Now, whatever the user types in, I'll be able to store in int user row. Then I need to get one for the column. So again, console.writeLine, because I want it to go on a new line. What column do you want to be 1? Now I'm going to store that variable, and I do it the same way. Int user column equals console.readLine. Now I have that. So we are actually adding on to the previous video. So if you're wondering where all this code comes into play, go ahead and watch the previous video. This is going to build my array, but I need to do something with this information that I just got from my user. I want to output. I want to know at what X and Y coordinate do we need to have 1? Well, instead of going through tons of if statements, I can just use a for loop that will do it for me. So I'm going to do for int row equals 1 to int max rows. This for loop is for my rows. It's going to loop 3 times because the maximum amount of rows I have is 3, and that's because in my array I have 3 rows and 3 columns. So this is going to loop 3 times through. But I also need a for loop inside this for loop. We're making a nested for loop for my column. So int column equals 1 to, space out that one, to int max columns. Now that I have that, and making sure I have no errors here, no red, making sure my variables are spelled correctly, I can go ahead and type in what I want to do. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and build my array, and I'm going to do int row, int column, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set it to 0. I got to make sure it's set to something because I just asked them which row and column, at what row and column point do they want there to be a 1. So I need to make sure all the rest gets set to 0. And this will make sure, this line of code will make sure that happens. Now I need to actually do something with the information they've inputted. And I need an if statement because we only want it to be 1 where they entered the row and the column. So I'm going to have if int user row, and that is the information that they typed in, equals int row. But I need 2 conditions to be true. This one and int user column equals int column. If both those statements are true, then I can build the 1. So I'm going to use my variable int build. I want the int row and the int column of whichever loop we are on to equal 1. And that will bring up my end if statement. So let's just talk about what these variables are doing. So if int user row, let's say the user has entered 1, equals the row that we're currently on in the loop, when it's going to start at 1 and go to 3. And the int user column, let's say they entered 2. If we're on that going through, then if they match up, we're going to say that current row and that current column is going to be equal to 1. And we have to have this and here because we got to make sure both of these are true. So let's go ahead and run the program and make sure that it works, and it will work. So what row do you want to be 1? So let's say we want row 1. We're going to type that in. What column do you want to be 1? Let's say column 3. Then right here we have in row 1, column 3, we have the 1. The rest are zeros, and that's because I entered. If we take a look at the code, we want 1. We want the first row. So if int user row equals int row, so 1, 1, and int user column equals int column, so we want 3 and 3. We entered 3 and want it to be on column 3. We're going to make this 1, and that matches up to the code right here. If you have any questions, you can always leave a comment below, and we'll see you guys next time.